Hello, all you friends and neighbors, you sisters and brothers and citizens of the world. We're here for another edition of Live from the Heartland, also known as Heartland at Home. This is number 37 for the week of January 30th. It'll be posted on youtube.com/Heartland Media. You can hear it on WLUW.org on Saturday mornings and anytime on youtube.com/Heartland Media. And today we're going to have, after we do a little talking about political things, local and global, we're going to have Raquel Garcia of the Pilsen Housing Cooperative coming on to talk to us about what's going on down in Pilsen. With all that said, let's start off in our usual manner, and I'm going to go to Thom. Thom, what are some good things that have happened to you this week or in your life and those around you?
In late January, we actually started having real winter. Not only did the temps drop, but we have real snow on the ground. And I got to tell you, I was thrilled with how cheery the grandson was after a half hour of sledding before school. Totally soaked with snow because it actually was not quite sledding snow, but they got halfway down the hill at Warren Park and it was just really nice. Katy, what about you?
Well, let me just say how cool it is that he could do that before school started.
Well, when you remote learn, there's a little more leeway in your school day. And
Yeah. I like it a lot.
But only about 5 or 10 minutes. And he had a full school day. But it started.
Okay. It started great. For me, let's see. The good thing this week, I am reading Braiding Sweetgrass, thanks to my beautiful reading group. And it is an incredible book. It's sobering about the Native American community, which we've become even more aware of since the election, since they helped so enormously in the result, and also because they are suffering inordinate losses due to COVID. So good things, right? Good things. Reading a good book, and I've got an appointment for my first shot for the vaccine. Yeah. Good. Okay, Michael, what's your good stuff?
Well, usually I tell you all how I'm having such a great time at the Y. This week, due to some oral surgery, I took 3 days off from the Y. It'll actually be 4 days. And that's always nice, just kind of lay around the house a little bit more than usual. And I did start a new book. I started reading Pachenko, which involves Korea, Japan, probably China. I'm liking it. I'll keep you posted on the next book I'm starting.
Yeah, that is a good book. We may be playing a little bit of music right now. We'll see. But if we do, it might be Charles Mingus.
On the international scene, our new administration is, making new announcements every day. But activists, anti-war activists, are really after the Biden administration to change U.S. policy regarding the war in Yemen. We're the ones paying for the Saudis to bomb the heck out of Yemen every day. It's a war that's not been getting coverage. We should not be a party to it. And it looks like now the Biden administration is going to review all the arms sales to the Saudis that happened over the last 4 years. So that's another really encouraging development.
That is very good news. That is very good news. Also, speaking of our new president, every day is better, isn't it? Every day is better.
Well, there's a little resistance coming up every day too now.
Well, this week, one of the things he did this week was, or the past week, was call for Climate Change Day, basically where he signed a lot of things into being or indicated a change in policy that would not require him to go to Congress or Senate. Because as you have observed, we don't have the lead. We have a tie. And what I think is very, very strange, because it's like, let me get this straight. We won 2 Georgia seats on the same day, and we have the tiebreaker, but we've still got McConnell essentially filibustering the Dems taking control of committee heads, of a lot of stuff. What are we supposed to do against that? That totally blows my mind.
Well, he needs at some point to agree to a power sharing arrangement or nothing will happen, including paying Congress because the continuing resolution runs out in another 30 days or so. So they're going to have to do some work at some point. Moscow Mitch is not cooperating. And to my mind, this is as good a time as any to throw out another vestige of white supremacy, which is the filibuster. And I really think we should be having a more serious discussion about getting rid of that tool right now, because that's the only reason why Mitch is wielding the power he has.
It's true. It's true. And it has been talked about, it continues to get talked about. I'm not sure regular Joe and Mary American knows how to affect their senators right now about that. Would we have a recommendation, or simply just call Dick Durbin's and Tammy Duckworth's office and say, hang in there, we won, act like it? Maybe
Durbin is in favor of pursuing the trial. He has said in a recent interview, there is a new effort to try to censure the president instead of having an impeachment trial. Personally, I don't think censure is enough for the treasonous activities the former president committed.
The coronavirus is still a main thing affecting all of us in the world. And throughout the world, there are 193 countries, I believe, that allow workers to take paid sick days. In other words, if you're sick, you can't really work. You could take the day off and you'll get paid for that. 179 of them have policies that allows workers, of 193 countries, 179 have these paid sick day holidays. Not here in the US. We don't have that. If you're an essential worker, you get no sick days paid. So,
well, it's the quote unquote essential workers who everyone is praising to the high heavens and putting signs out in front of nursing homes saying heroes work here. Yeah. What about those heroes getting a day off to be sick in case, or to get a day off because someone they know has turned up sick? We don't have that. And what Michael was just talking about is that we are one of the few countries in the world that does not have, from the federal level, sick days. Now, certain states do, but I can tell you, we could guess which states those are. Those are the same states that do not have right to work laws, okay? Those are the same states that have collective bargaining in part of their setup. Or they are also the same municipalities that have those things. This is not a red or blue issue. This is health. And one of the things that we're going to keep talking about is how we can't go back to normal. And you can check us out each show for the many ways we cannot go back to normal. And today's is we cannot stand not having sick days, paid sick days for essential laborers. How many of you have gone to the store in the last week? How many of you have gone to a grocery store in the last week? It's the one place most of us go, except for you old farts who have kids who go in there for you.
Or get delivery.
But I'll tell you what, I feel for those people every time I go in. And it's not because people are not wearing masks. People wear masks now, thank God. But some of them have them below their nose. Some of their co-workers in the back room might not be fully masked. This has got to be one of the bigger lessons we take from this. Who's essential? Why? And how about if we start treating them that way?
Meanwhile, we do excel in one thing. We're the top 4 of virus infections in the world, along with South Africa, Brazil, and the United Kingdom. So there's one thing we can be proud of.
We're so exceptional, aren't we?
We're very exceptional.
Each day is more like a creepy dream from a movie scene. All day at home with my family, can't see anyone. Put on pants, get the mail, turn around. Maybe go on a run. See a friend, dive away on the ground. I never shower in quarantine, it's bad hygiene. And now I've taken up gardening. Who have I become? Put on pants, get the mail, turn around. people getting restless, and now just on the news, they've canceled all the rest of school. And we've run out of puzzles and new shows to stream, but we got nothing left to do, but we gotta make it through. Hey, the quarantine is not quite over. What if I can go out and see everyone until 2021? I can't see anyone until 2021. For 40 days and for 40 nights, we've been in this room, and we can't stand the same meal plan. Chicken again, on the edge, on the verge, breaking down. Yeah, we've given up most nights and just microwave these bagel bites. Bagel bites! Bagel bites! Woo-hoo! We used to be better parents, 2 months ago. They show us homework and we would help, we would try hard. Now we give up and go watch Die Hard. They're too young. Everybody tells me, be careful what you do. Don't go around breaking all the rules. Hey, and I know that it's important, and we gotta stay at home, but I'm feeling so alone. I'm like a dog without a bone. Hey, the quarantine is not quite over. When can I go back out and see everyone? Will it be 2021?
So I understand not only did Michael get his first shot, but Katie, you're lined up to get yours?
Yeah, like I said, today. I'm going later today for my first shot. Yeah. So the problem being right now, the best news, is that we have a vaccine. We have 2, actually, maybe 3. And they seem, knock on wood, to be effective. The worst news, the less than best news, is that those who need it the most are getting it the least. Okay? Michael and I, we're lined up. You are going to be, Thom. We'll make sure by next week you've got an appointment somewhere. But what about all those people who are going to work every day? The grocery workers, the garbage collectors, everybody who's working.
Well, you said that you and I, Katie, are getting it. We both have the same health provider.
Mhm.
Thom, you haven't gotten it and you're still waiting. Can you give us some information on what you know from the COVID coaches around about where and when you get the vaccine?
Well, the first thing I'll say is there's not enough vaccine. So we are all going after a limited supply. And the frontline people who were supposed to get it first have still not been completely inoculated. You can look at the numbers. There's not enough vaccine for the number of us who want it. Number 2, you can go through the secret numbers in the passcode like I've gotten 2 of, one for Rush and one for another healthcare center. But that doesn't mean when you show up that there'll be vaccine, because for the most part, these are end of the day, show up. If we have leftover, you can get a shot kind of situations. So the general advice is go through your primary care provider to find out where you can get it. Understand that they may not have supply for a while. And in my case, I'm vulnerable in 2 different categories, but I'm really not planning to be able to get a shot for another 20 or 30 days until the supply catches up. I hope I can start sooner than that, but I think we should be calmer. I've been self-quarantined for 10 months. I can do it for another 1 or 2 for the supplies to catch up.
That's exactly the way I felt about it, and it's heartwarming that both my niece, one of my nieces, and my goddaughter Casey, both took some pains to email me the very exact directions on what they understood as a path to getting a vaccine. And I was sitting here going, I'm not in a hurry. I'm not in a hurry, mostly because, like you said, Thom, there are people ahead of me. but I was touched by their, saying, please get it. And so I am going to get it. I see your finger there, Tom. What do you got?
I just want to suggest that the best way to keep up on what's happening is to sign up at covidcoach.chicago.gov. I've already had 2 reminders. They don't have any vaccine to sign me up for yet, but I am in a system along with the county and along with the state. I'm hoping someday I'll get a call.
We're going to do a little.
All of you as you deal with this COVID crisis and trying to get a vaccine. And we'll get back to you in just a moment with our next guest.
Well,
Hey.
Tom, you seem to be frozen up there.
Yes.
What were you saying, Tom?
Tom?
I'm looking forward to bringing in our first guest for today to talk a little bit about housing cooperatives.
Tristeza no meu pobre coração e até jurou não me deixar e foi-se embora para nunca mais voltar. Eu e o meu amor foi-se embora me deixando tanta dor, tanta tristeza no meu pobre coração.
Não posso esquecer o teu olhar longe dos olhos meus. Ai, o meu viver é te esperar pra te dizer adeus.
Mulher amada, destino já correu. Não posso esquecer o teu olhar longe dos olhos meus, longe dos olhos meus. Não posso esquecer o teu olhar longe dos olhos meus. Já correu. Não posso esquecer o teu olhar longe dos olhos meus, longe dos olhos meus.
Welcome back, and thank you for that smooth music on a winter day. We're talking this morning with Raquel Garcia, who is the executive director of the Pilsen Housing Cooperative. And we decided to have a conversation with her because gentrification and the pressures of it in Pilsen are once again in the news. For those of us who've been in Chicago for a while, we can remember back in the 70s when it was artists moving into Pilsen who were allegedly driving up rents and forcing families out. Today, artists are joining with families to try to help residents stay in place while other development pressures come on the community. So Raquel, thank you for joining us to talk a little bit about one possible solution to helping families stay in Pilsen. I guess I want to ask you, how this all came about, and in fact, what is a housing cooperative?
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's great to be here. Any opportunity to talk about the Pilsen Housing Cooperative is a good one. So I actually heard about it. It's really small world. I heard about it through our now alderman, who happened to be a colleague of my husband. And so he mentioned it. He said there's a group of artists and families who are getting together and trying to build this Pilsen Housing Co-op. And back then it was still, in its beginnings, it's still planning and thinking through what that means and what that looks like for Pilsen. And so I went to one of their meetings and was like, yes, this is a new way of thinking about housing. And, we all kind of grow up with the American dream of what it means to own a home and what it means to count on it, to retire, and what it means to invest and location, right? But this really forced us, my husband and myself, to rethink what a home meant and what it meant to invest in a place and in a community. So going back to your second question as to what is a housing co-op, for us, there's different types of co-ops, but a housing co-op, Pilsen specifically, is a limited equity. So that means that we don't really earn market value on our home, on our property. We kind of get back what we put in. So let's say our unit itself is worth, I don't know, 150,000. We might make some minor investment in it, change, maybe the heating or maybe the fans or whatever. All of that has to be approved by the board, and we might get a small amount of that investment back. But at the end of, if we ever decide to sell, what we get back is the equity we've built. So whatever we've paid on our principal is what we get, and then the rest really goes to the co-op. So it's a way of investing in the community, because I don't take any of the earnings with me, any of the market value. I only take what I put in. So it's kind of scary for a lot of folks because, like I mentioned before, it's thinking about housing not as an investment for retiring or a financial investment, but really as an investment in the community and making sure that the community that my daughter grew up in, that was a teacher in, and that my husband's a current teacher in, is still a home, a place we can call home, and help other folks be able to call it home eventually. So we're currently in the middle of trying to buy more buildings, and so hoping to make this an affordable dream for other families in the community.
Raquel, could you maybe give us a little history of the Pilsen community and then elaborate somewhat on how the Pilsen Housing Cooperative will work against gentrification?
Sure. Well, in terms of history, I've been a resident here, so I can only speak to the years I've been here. I'm not as well versed in its longer history, but for the last 8-9 years since I've been here, Pilsen for me was the first place I could call home. I'm a Mexican immigrant, so I was born in Mexico and lived a long time in Rogers Park, so very familiar with Heartland Cafe. Lived there for pretty much since most of my, from 10 to 18, lived there. So I grew up, in Rogers Park, in both West Ridge area and closer to the lake area. So when I came to Pilsen, I was shocked to discover that they were Mexican American immigrants who spoke both English and Spanish. And I always felt like I didn't belong, growing up in Rogers Park, I just didn't feel connected. I didn't feel like there were people that I'd identified. And as a new immigrant family, you know, we stayed very close to each other. So it was like my aunts and my uncles. I didn't really make connections. And in Pilsen, that changed dramatically. Like I know my neighbors from both sides across the street. We see each other. And so I think part of the history of Pilsen is that community. It feels like a safe haven at times for like-minded people, whether it be you know, centered around art, around music, around food. There is always a sense of community. And so for me, that's the history of Pilsen that I want to preserve. And gentrification has really, you know, it's a buzzword, but I don't necessarily, I can't say that I fully grasp gentrification, but I can tell you what I see happening, which means that the buildings are getting sold and the developers are paying, they're saying that they're going to pay top dollar, but at the end of, you know, from what we've heard from talking to neighbors and people that we know, is that they're not really getting, they're getting cash. And so they take less so that they can get cash payments. And then developers turn around, renovate, and then rent out those apartments for, you know, twice as much as what the original owner was renting them out, or turn them into condos and sell them for $350,000-$400,000. Who you know, people from Pilsen, once they move, they go and find a place where they were paying cheaper rent. They can't afford to buy into the place. They can't afford to buy those condos that are being developed. And one of the saddest things is when I was teaching, I no longer teach, but when I was teaching, I taught at Whittier Elementary, which is a dual language elementary here in Pilsen. And, you know, I taught there for 3 years almost. And I would walk down 18th or down 21st place, and my students would see me and they'll yell out, "Miss Garcia," and I would say hi, or I would run into them at the laundromat and they would be like, "You do laundry too?" You know, like it was just a very good sense of community. And eventually, you know, I stopped seeing those students around. Their families moved because they couldn't afford their apartments anymore. A lot of the apartments where I know my students lived have turned into gutted and rehabbed and are now being rented. They've been priced out, really. That's really what, to me, what gentrification means. It's being priced out.
Your alderman recently got passed a anti-gentrification ordinance. It essentially, without getting into the weeds too much, prevents the deconversion of 2 flats or 3 flats into single-family homes. How will that affect the Pilsen Housing Cooperative?
Well, for us, that, you know, like our goal isn't to take buildings and completely rehab them, and then, because then we wouldn't be able to price them at a price point where families can afford them. So our goal is, one of the main things we've discussed when we were creating the co-op was, what does it mean to have livable conditions, right? What does it mean to have humane livable conditions? So we're not trying to have units that are completely rat infested and, you know, like we got to find that balance where we create a basic standard, I guess, a living standard. And so our goal isn't to take a building and turn it into a pristine top-notch anything other than making it livable. And that really makes it affordable, because if we were to invest a large amount of money, the prices would go up, and then the families that we're trying to keep in Pilsen wouldn't be able to afford it. And that's one of the issues that we've had as a co-op, and that's something that we're trying to work with our aldermen and the Chicago Housing, because there aren't a lot of finance options for families who want to buy into co-ops. So there aren't a lot of banks that we can go to say we need a share loan so that families can take out some money to buy into the co-op.
Katy?
Are you aware of the co-op bank?
Which one?
Well, I thought there was only one. I also live in a co-op building.
Okay.
It's slightly different than what you just described, though. It is based on shares Like I
Mhm.
have shares, not my unit. But
Mhm.
if I chose to sell, to move, I would be able to just sell my unit. There's a little less of the full cooperative that
Mhm.
you described,
Mhm.
which is really wonderful.
Yeah.
Um, but why was I starting this?
You asked about the
Oh,
bank.
the co-op bank. Yeah, that is a bank that now exists to help people in co-ops. I can't remember the name of it, but I'll find it and send it to you.
Okay. Yeah, that would be great. I'm
Say
sorry.
it again, Tom?
The National Cooperative Bank
There you go. There's the name
Is
of it.
that here in Chicago or is it?
in
Yeah.
DC.
There is one in Chicago.
Okay, well, that's great information. Yeah, like we're working with different organizations to try and find places where we can get loans so that the families who don't have enough to make a large down payment can get a loan for their shares.
Maybe you should talk to us about the challenges of pulling that off. A project
Yeah.
of that size. You mentioned about getting a second building. I am familiar with the Resurrection Project, which I believe
Mhm.
are collaborators with you. How is it that you approach as a community group, becoming landowners?
Yeah. So our first building, the building that I currently live in, was kind of serendipitous. It was owned by Steve, who still lives here. He bought a share, and so he's retiring here. He's been here for over 30 years. He's owned it for over 20 and lived in the building while it was owned by someone else. So he knows the building inside and out. And he actually just approached the co-op and said, I want to sell, and I don't want to sell to developers. And I want to sell, and I want to be able to stay after I sell. And I want to be able to do something good with what I own. And so our first building really came about because someone approached us, and we wish more through that community building, right? We try and develop those relationships where building owners are approaching us to sell their buildings and keep it in Pilsen and bring people from the community to buy. So that's the challenge. The challenge is, how do we convince our neighbors, because really that's who we're talking to. We're talking to our neighbors. We see a for sale sign, there's a second building committee. If there is a for sale sign, they might call up the owners and say, explain who we are, explain what the co-op does, what the mission is, and try and have some conversations around what potential there is for us to buy the building. We are currently in conversations with two different building owners, and so we hope one of those will pan out. Obviously, the hard part is convincing them to give us a fair a fair price of the building, and not, a lot of people who own buildings, think they're going to sell it and make triple, double, whatever, like make a killing. And so if we were to pay the inflated prices that gentrification has kind of driven up, then we wouldn't be able to sell the unit or the shares at a price point where families and Pilsen families could afford them. So that's the negotiating part. That's what makes it difficult. That idea of we're not only trying to buy a building, we're trying to buy a piece of Pilsen community. We're trying to see the owners that they're not just making an investment, or they're not just selling their building for a profit. They're also investing in a way in their community. So that's also one of the things that is hard. But I think sometimes hearing from the members, hearing the stories behind each share, hearing the stories behind each unit really helps the buyers. So we hope that eventually we will get a second building. I think this year is definitely going to be, we're definitely going to move closer towards that direction. So
Raquel, could you briefly explain the working artist component of
yeah.
housing cooperative setup, and what have you learned that the rest of us are learning working at home? The pandemic, are there some tips you can give us about this working at home thing that you have some artists in your cooperative doing?
Yeah. So part of what the mission of the Pilsen Co-op is really focused on keeping artists in Pilsen and keeping families in Pilsen. So the people that we prioritize when we look at applications, for example, for this first building, we had to have a lot of discussions as a co-op, but towards the board, we had a lot of applications. So how do we choose who gets to be, who gets the unit? So our first goal was to keep the people who were already living in the building. We wanted to keep them here. So we didn't want to displace anyone, because that's the hard part, right? So we didn't want to displace anyone. So once they were offered the opportunity to join the co-op, and some of them did, I was one of them because I was a renter here. And so I stayed, and some people decided to leave, and also funding would have allowed others to stay, but unfortunately, we weren't able to secure funding for those families who needed it. So that's why we really need some sort of change in Chicago legislation that shows support towards co-ops. And so the working artist component came because when we get applications, we prioritize artists. How can we create space for them, right? How can we make not only studio space, but also a living space? So discussion was about how do we make an apartment building to have both. So this one, unfortunately, wasn't, it's not structured that way. And but future buildings, the goal is to have both of those spaces, spaces for artists to live and spaces for artists to create. So, and being able to do that from home, like I work in higher ed, but I'm also a writer. So having that flexibility to do that has been really helpful, because I understand now the importance of having a space to call your own. And I don't think we would have been my family would have been able to do that without the Pilsen Housing Cooperative. So I'm just really grateful for the creation and the ability to be part of it.
Raquel Garcia, your ward, the 25th Ward, Pilsen, has had a transition in its political leadership.
Mm-hmm.
The former Brown Beret, who later wore a wire, Juan Solis, and he left his kind of radical youth and became a friend of all the developers. He's gone, and you have Byron Setcho Lopez, a friend of yours, who for a long time was involved with the Pilsen Alliance, and is quite a good guy. And I'm wondering how the transition in local political leadership and its initiatives have affected Pilsen's housing co-op.
Yeah, that's, we met before the transition. We actually met with all the aldermen who were running, with all the people who were running for alderman. So we had to sit down with every single one of them, and he was really the only one that was responsive. We showed them some very actionable items that they could take to support Pico, and we're still in communication with him and having conversations to make sure that these items are done. He hasn't really delivered on them yet, but we're keeping up the pressure and hoping that that relationship that we built before he was elected will eventually lead to some execution of those demands, those not demands, but suggestions as to how they can support Pico. So we hope that relationship will eventually lead to additional funding. Especially funding is a big one. And a lot of subsidies that developers get, it's difficult for us as a co-op to qualify for. So we're hoping some change in legislation would lead to that.
Raquel, thank you so much for being here. Before we let you go, can we just ask you, how are you getting through? What is your best method for getting through pandemic right now yourself? Music, books, on TV?
Baking. Been baking. I've been baking a lot. It's been baking and finding time to move my body somehow, because you feel it after a while. So making time for
especially if you're baking.
Yeah, exactly. So I do want to contradict the other ones. They kind of cancel each other out.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your good work in Pilsen, a community that is dear to everybody on the screen, and so many more.
Well, thank you for having me.
All right, shine on.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, thank you.
With the leaves blowing across the highway, where its beast keeps moving around the bend. Lonely heart, tired of traveling. A lonely heart's got no place to go. The wind is blowing and the sun is rising. Skies is gray and I think it's gonna snow. A lonely heart gets tired, so tired of traveling. A lonely heart's got no place to go. Skies is gray and I think it's gonna snow. A lonely heart gets tired, so tired of traveling. A lonely heart's got no place to go.
Well, that was delightful. So last week we had we managed to score a great interview with Kelly Cassidy, our state rep and committee woman. If you recall, or maybe you've heard since, there's a bit of a hullabaloo going on up here in the 7th Senate District because our just sworn in Senator, Heather Staines, who has served us very well, I must say, announced that she was stepping down. Now, for many of us who've lived our lives in Chicago and paid attention to politics, this is a uniquely machine kind of move, or at least we identify it as a machine move. You take your oath of office, a week later you step down, you insert the person you want in your spot, and life goes on. For us, that person who announced she was interested in stepping into that spot is our state rep, our current state rep, Kelly Cassidy, who you are very familiar with. She's been on the show many times. So that means that then there will be yet another spot that we need to appoint someone, that someone needs to appoint someone for. And that someone is not the voters, okay? So the problem and the hubbub that has been going on since that interview we did last week is, what are we doing here, folks? If we are the progressives, do we not honor what the voters say? And how do we do that honoring? So the conversation is going on. Our friends at Indivisible held a session this past week that, in fact, a number of self-proclaimed candidates showed up for. We will see what that evolves into this weekend. The 49th Ward will meet with our alderman and Network 49 on Saturday, today, later today. So if you want to find out what the 49th Ward folks are thinking about, sign in through either Maria Haddon, Alderwoman Maria Haddon's site, or Network 49 to find out the latest. I don't know.
What development, by the way,
yeah,
is why some of us tried to run Katy Hogan as our ward committeeman to keep this whole political role independent from elected officials.
I heard nothing of this.
Back when Kelly Cassidy became ward committeeman, there was an effort to bring in a non-elected official as ward committeeman. Katy, you're too modest to remember your to try to keep independent thinking about how we get our candidates going. And it is ironic that in the 49th Ward, with really good people, Heather Staines, Kelly Cassidy, whatever, that were relying on this old trick bag of the machine to put people in instead of letting the voters elect.
Well, and it's confusing to voters too, when you've got candidates who say, I want to be appointed, but then I don't want to run again. Okay, we have a couple candidates like that right now, or people who are putting themselves forward. No real politician says that, okay? Never do they say, okay, I'll be a placeholder and then I can leave. People who have said that wind up not being a placeholder.
Right.
You know, they wind up either running again or not being a placeholder, period. So this is a very interesting little area that we can all play in currently, since we don't have to be terrified at what's coming at us from DC so much. We'll see about that.
So stay tuned, folks.
Yeah.
Another follow-up is what's going on with trying to reopen the High Ridge Y. There was finally a meeting with a small group of residents who were trying to keep the Y open, and YMCA of Chicago officials. It didn't go very far. The Y is claiming poverty, even while they expand their suburban footprint and close down urban neighborhood YMCAs. I don't think this battle is over with. There is a full copy of the meetings that have been taking place through the Facebook group. And you might also want to check out an interview with Sue Ontiveros, who's been doing a lot of work on this locally. It's a very interesting effort that may in fact lead to a local effort to take over the building and try to reopen those programs.
Wow. After hearing from Raquel Garcia about taking over buildings, one that includes a swimming pool, gymnasium, and a whole lot of other stuff, that's a tall order. And you were referring to the Jurafsky podcast with Sue?
Yes.
Okay.
That's where you can find that interview.
We can find that there. Cool.
A man who battled blatant racism in pro sports and was quite a considerable figure with a lot of grace and patience was Hank Aaron, the home run king. Well, I guess Barry Bonds has gone beyond that now, but the recognized home run king would be Hank Aaron, and he passed away. I think he was 86. He was just a great ball player and a wonderful human being. And a little sports news on following that is that the Hall of Fame, which players are elected by sportscasters and sports writers, and that's all questionable whether it's a fair way to do it. But no one was inducted this year. That means right-winger and really pretty blatantly racist Curt Schilling didn't get voted in, and he doesn't want to be on the list next time. And he also was fired from ESPN. And steroid users, Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens, two really great ball players, but who were caught using steroids, they didn't get voted in. So no picks for the Hall of Fame this year.
There will be a celebration because the 2020 Hall of Fame was postponed. So there will be a game
Good.
this year in Cooperstown.
Right. Very cool. Also,
What's happening
today,
later today, Katie?
today we have a meeting. As soon as I get off this, I'm going over to start a Zoom session with my beloveds from Network 49. It's our first since before the election, which we were all active in on the fair tax question. So we're basically taking a pulse of the organization this year and going forward. Our special guest is our Alderwoman Maria Haddon, which I know a lot of folks are going to have a lot of questions for. So tune in. It's on Zoom, and Network 49 is got its own Facebook page, and you can find.
And all you sisters and brothers, for 25 years now, we've been bringing you live from the Heartland, which is now called Heartland at Home. As I said at the beginning, and I'll repeat now, you can hear us live every Saturday morning on WLUW 88.7 or 88.7 Chicago Sound Alliance. You can get us at youtube.com/Heartland Media anytime, and you can find us if you want to see us. You do that on YouTube as well as going to CAN TV. As we go out, I'm not sure who's taking us out, but it may be Twin
Too
Peaks.
good in the world.
The world needs all the good we do.
All power to the people.